I made a bullet hell game for a university project. I had 1 week to come up with the idea, and then I had 3.5 months to finish it by myself. I am currently studying at Open Window, and my major is game design. My second year of studies came by really fast, literally just a little bit after a game jam where I was using that as a warm-up, where I made a game in just 2 weeks. Before I knew it, we were already tasked with coming up with 3 unique game ideas in just 1 week. We would then pick one of those games and tackle that for the rest of the semester. Hey guys, before I continue, can I please ask that you subscribe? I'm so close to 1,000 subscribers. I would really like to hit 1,000 subs before the end of the year. So please go ahead and hit the subscribe button. I would really appreciate it. Thank you. Alright, so I came up with 3 game ideas. The first idea is called The Loop Possible. This is a game where you play as a cursed detective where you're stuck in a time loop after an explosion happens at an event. Somehow you're the only one who remembers what happened. Gather clues and disarm the explosive before you and everyone else dies. I was using games like The Sexy Brutale and The Forgotten City as inspiration, and I was hoping to make use of some really nice low-poly assets from the Unity asset store. Then I came up with The Wizard's Fate. It was going to be a roguelike bullet hell made with pixel art. Pixel art? That was definitely delusional of me. There was no way that was happening. I did not have the time for that. You would play as a final year wizarding student who botches her teleportation spell and ends up in the Demon Lord's realm. Using the power of an ancient artifact, she must slay the Demon Lord and his minions to escape. Before the start of the semester, I was playing quite a lot of Vampire Survivors, so you can imagine where a lot of my inspiration came from. Lastly, for my third idea, I came up with Blood Money. Now, listen, I grew up as a big fan of Call of Duty Black Ops Zombies. I played that like crazy. I really enjoyed the simplicity of round-based zombies, going for high rounds and then finishing the Easter eggs. I thought, why not just go ahead and make a game like that? So in this game, you'd be in a dystopian future where zombies are used for an amusing blood sport. To be guaranteed freedom and wealth, a framed detective must escape the zombie-infested arena or die trying. Just imagine like a Call of Duty Black Ops Zombies kind of gameplay, but within one of those arenas from the finals. That's basically what I was going for. So in the end, I decided to go with Wizard's Fate as my idea for the semester. First, I had to work on some kind of prototype to get the game going. So working here in Unity and using C#, I focused on getting the character moving and then getting some enemies spawning. Since this was literally the beginning of my second year of game design, I wasn't exactly all that confident in my C# abilities. So I kind of cheated with the ways I was bringing the enemies into the game with how I was spawning them. I always wanted the enemies to be spawning outside of the camera, right? But instead of simply just coding, a certain distance away from the player, that's where the enemy would spawn, no, I decided, I'm gonna go ahead and assign a bunch of game objects as children to the player that are outside of the camera space. So every time I would try and spawn an enemy, I would choose a random one of those game objects that are around the camera. This is where I came into my very first problem. So every time I would instantiate the enemy, I was using that game object as the target, right? But my syntax was wrong, so I was actually unintentionally setting that game object as the parent of the enemy. So this basically means that when the empty game object moves, so too would the enemy, right? And so now, those empty game objects are children of the player. So when the player moves, those empty game objects move, and when those empty game objects move, so too does the enemy, right? So this would mean when the player moves, the enemy moves as well, and so the player can never really escape the enemies. In fact, it just seems like the player just stands still while everything is just moving to the player just fine. So yeah, bit of a weird issue, but yeah. Now that I'm using object pooling, I'm just simply giving it a position in the world. I am not going and setting it as a child of anything actually. But speaking of spawning enemies, why do I actually need to spawn enemies? Well, because it's a bullet hell game, I need a lot of enemies. And this is actually what leads me to my second problem. After I had made my second attack, which my lecturer so-called the Blades of Justice, they started asking me questions like, how long it would take before I would have performance issues.
No, that's what I was gonna ask, like how many have you gotten to before performance starts tanking?
How long I can play the game before things start breaking. And to be honest, I hadn't really played the game like all that long for things to really start going wrong. I was just playing the game and I was like, yeah, cool, this is working, great. Just keep going. But yeah, it turns out with this ability, carving them up like crazy, was actually causing quite a bit of an issue because, you see, I'm not really using object pooling at this point. At this point, I was still instantiating and deleting them. This was causing a huge issue with memory cleanup. It took about 2 or 3 minutes before things started dramatically slowing down because of the performance issues. At this point, I didn't actually know what object pooling was. My lecturers told me about it.
Your game will benefit from something called object pooling. I highly recommend
Yeah.
that you do this. So you spawn a certain amount of enemies and you recycle through them. So you never destroy them because
Okay, okay.
because the problem with spawning and destroying is that it allocates memory, and then when it deallocates the memory, it doesn't reallocate it correctly. So
Okay. They told me how to implement it, and I was like, awesome, I will do that. And yeah, after having done that, everything was buttery smooth again. Let me know if I should make a video about object pooling and why you should absolutely be using it in your Unity projects. Now then, my last real problem that I had was that I was running out of time and I still hadn't done any of the art at this point. I was still set on the idea that it would need to be pixel art, but man, I knew for a fact that I did not have the time to get this done, especially if I was going to have a few animations in there as well. There's no way.
I like this. If you put bloom and you use basic shapes, this could still be a game that you could make money off. Like Geometry Wars.
So I listened to the advice that my lecturers gave me and I completely pivoted into a different direction. I decided on a completely different art style, drawing inspiration from games like Geometry Wars and Geometry Dash. And I went ahead and I decided to change the name to Geomania. For the design of the player, I decided to lean into a butterfly as the inspiration for the ship. I thought maybe it could look cool since it has more of the round angles. And for the enemies, I decided simple, sharp angles should do the trick. I must say though, I have to give credit to my classmate Willem, as he gave me the idea of using a little bit of a shadowy effect on the enemies. I really think, well, and the player, I really think this came out quite nicely, and I think at this point my project was finally starting to click, visually. Alright, so let's talk about the attacks. I mean, it's a bullet hell game, you play as a character, you have a bunch of passive attacks, we should definitely talk about these sort of things. Since it's a game where you're going to be roaming around and killing enemies and increasing your power bit by bit as you level up, I may as well actually talk about what it is that you're leveling up, right? So let's talk about the different attacks and how they work. Now, just like Vampire Survivors, all of the attacks are passive. You don't really have a way of activating any of the abilities other than by owning them, I guess. They just sort of work on their own as soon as you get them. I have 5 different attack abilities that can be upgraded. So the first one is just a simple one, it is the homing missile. It is literally the very first attack you get in the game. I mean, as soon as you start playing the game, this is the attack you already have. It's a very simple attack, it does exactly what the name suggests it does, it's a missile that homes in on the target. So yeah, as soon as it hits an enemy, it explodes on impact and does a bit of damage. Upgrading this attack simply just increases the fire rate and the amount of damage that it deals. Alright, then you've got the gravity well, which I must say is not a very original ability. I mean, it's literally the same as the garlic from Vampire Survivors. I really like the way it plays, so I decided, I'm gonna go ahead and implement it into the game. It's just a field around the player that as soon as the enemy walks into the range, it starts dealing a small amount of damage over time, and also slows the enemies. By upgrading the gravity well, it just simply increases the amount of damage that it does, and increases the radius. Then you've got Chain Lightning. Honestly, this ability for me had the most potential for VFX, but I just ran out of time. It was the last ability that I brought into the game, and if I had more time, I was really aiming to go for something like the Chain Lightning ability from Thrall in Warcraft. I think it would have looked really cool. Maybe someday in the future, Let me know in the comments section below if you want to see me take this game a bit further, if I have the time and the funds. So the way this ability works is it hits an enemy, and as soon as it hits this enemy, it then deals damage to it first of all, and then it'll look for another enemy within a certain radius. If there is an enemy in that radius, it'll then chain to that one, deal damage to that one, and then continue on and on and on until it reaches the limit that has been set. Upgrading this ability will increase the amount of damage, the radius that it searches, and the number of enemies that it can chain to. Getting it to max level basically feels like you're wiping off the entire map. It's kind of like cheating, but that's part of the fun. Alright, cool. So then moving on to Forward Blast. I mean, this is a very simple attack. It does exactly what it says. I mean, it shoots a blast in the forward direction. Upgrading this attack will increase the amount of enemies that it can pierce through, it'll also increase the amount of damage that it does, and the fire rate. This is also another one of those abilities that I think has really cool looking effects. I think I could have made it look even cooler. Then lastly, we've got the Spinning Blades, or well, yeah, the Blades of Justice as my lecturer put it. When you get this ability, you start off with just one that simply orbits around the player, and then upgrading it, it'll increase the speed at which it orbits the player and the number of the blades, and of course the amount of damage it deals. When players went ahead and paired this with the gravity well, it was a very clear strat for people to just simply stay still. But hey, now that I've gone ahead and given you the rundown of all of the abilities, go ahead and try it out for free on itch.io. It is free to play. Let me know which one is your favorite. Alright, cool. So let's quickly go over the enemies then in this game. Obviously, yes, I know they are quite simple, I know. But it's still fun going around and destroying them all. Now remember I mentioned that there was a clear AFK strat. Now, that only works up until a certain time. Once the ranged enemies spawn, then it is basically impossible to do that anymore. The intent was to make sure that the player cannot just simply stay there AFK for too long. And then there is the final boss. Yep, I managed to squeeze in a final boss just in the nick of time. And I am so glad that I did that because honestly, now with the final boss, it actually gives the game a definitive end and not just allowing the player to just go eventually and die because the enemies are too difficult to kill. But yeah, awesome. I'm super proud of this game. It took me a lot of effort to make and I'm so glad that I got it done. I learned a lot from the process of making this game and I'm so happy about that. Also guys, just another thing, now that I have 2 years of game dev behind my belt, I would like to offer one-on-one sessions for anyone who is trying to improve their game dev. Feel free to reach out to me on Discord and we can sort something out. But yeah, please go ahead and let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Leave a like if you did in fact like the video and please go ahead and subscribe. I'm so close to 1,000 subscribers. I will leave a link in the description to the itch page so you can go ahead and download the game and play it for free. I really would appreciate any feedback and support. Thank you so much for watching and I'll check you guys in the next one. Goodbye. Just something working. So using Serenity and C#. Well, it's a bullet hole game. Bullet hole?